My grandfather's story. My grandfather came from Russia. He was born in Leningrad and lived there through World War II. When we were kids, he told us many stories about his childhood, some funny, some sad. But there was one story I'll never forget. He told it only once, swore it was true, and refused to speak about it again. It happened during the Siege of Leningrad. In September 1941, the German army surrounded the city and cut off all the roads. No one could get in or out. Hitler planned to starve the entire population to death. It became one of the longest, deadliest sieges in human history. After a year, more than 100,000 people were dead. The streets were filled with corpses, frozen, rotting, lying unburied in the snow. At that time, my grandfather was only 6 years old. He lived in an apartment building near the city center with his mother, Zenaida, and his 2 older sisters. At first, things weren't too bad. They still had some food, but soon everything began to run out. Each day grew harder. Some days they had a crust of bread, other days, nothing at all. People began to eat pets, cats, dogs, rats. And when there were no animals left, the unthinkable started: cannibalism. Their building had 4 apartments on the first floor. My grandfather's family lived in one. A woman with 2 sons lived in the next. A man and his wife in the third. 2 unmarried sisters shared the fourth. One night, my grandfather lay awake, stomach aching from hunger. Suddenly, terrible screams echoed through the hallway, cries for help that woke the entire family. His mother, Zenaida, was a brave woman. Despite her children's pleas not to go, she decided to see what was happening. She told them to lock the door and not open it for anyone. In the corridor, she noticed the next apartment door slightly ajar, the one where the woman and her 2 boys lived. She pushed it open just a little and peeked inside. What she saw froze her blood. On the floor lay a severed human hand, surrounded by a dark pool of blood. From deeper inside the apartment came sickening chewing sounds. Horrified, she fled back to her own apartment, pounding on the door until her children let her in. Pale and shaking, she bolted the door and told them what she had seen. The older girls burst into tears. My grandfather ran and hid under the bed. The next day, Zenaida looked out again. The door to that apartment was closed, and everything was silent. Weeks passed. The army managed to open a small supply route, and some food began to reach the city. My grandfather's family survived, though weak and frail. One morning, Zenaida gathered their last bits of money and went out to see if she could buy food. When she returned, she noticed that the door to the third apartment, where the man and his wife lived, was hanging by a single hinge. She pushed it open. In the dim light, she saw 2 bodies lying on the floor, stripped almost completely of flesh. She stumbled back to her apartment, sick with horror, and barricaded the door again. But their small food supply soon ran out. If they didn't find something soon, they would starve. Zenaida finally decided to try again. She stepped into the corridor. The door to the 4th apartment opened. One of the middle-aged sisters stepped out. She looked strangely healthy, even plump, while everyone else in the city was thin and wasted away. The woman smiled pleasantly. "Hello," she said, and started walking toward Zenaida. Something about her smile made Zenaida's stomach twist. She began to back away. Then she saw the other sister behind her, creeping up silently, gripping a huge axe. Zenaida screamed. She was trapped between them. There was nowhere to run. At that moment, her daughters, watching from the window, saw what was happening. By sheer luck, a group of Russian soldiers were passing by on the street below. The girls screamed for help. The soldiers rushed inside, climbing the stairs to the first floor. When they reached the corridor, they found the 2 fat women trying to drag Zenaida into their apartment. The soldiers raised their rifles and shouted for them to stop. The woman with the axe swung it at them, and they shot her between the eyes. The other sister and Zenaida fell to the floor. Sobbing, Zenaida told the soldiers that the women were cannibals. that they had eaten the neighbors from 2 apartments and were about to kill her next. The soldiers searched the rooms. When they found the half-eaten remains inside, they knew she was telling the truth. They ordered the surviving sister to kneel and executed her on the spot, a single bullet to the back of the head. That was the punishment for cannibalism in those days. A year later, the Red Army pushed the Germans back, and the siege finally ended. Over 1.5 million people had died. Somehow, my grandfather and his family survived. When he told us this story, he ended with a grim smile and said, "After all, those 2 fat sisters had a lot of meat on their bones." One day, a boy was sitting in his classroom in school. He was extremely bored and was waiting for the school bell to ring. When he looked out the window, something caught his eye. There was a photograph lying on the grass outside. When school was over, he ran outside and picked up the photograph before anyone else had a chance to see it. Turning it over in his hands, he realized it was a picture of an incredibly beautiful girl. She was wearing a white top, a short black skirt, black tights, and black shoes. For some reason, she was holding up 2 fingers. The girl was so pretty that he wanted to meet her. He showed the photograph to everyone in the school and asked if they knew her. Unfortunately, nobody recognized her. That night, when he went to bed, he placed the photo on his bedside table and went to sleep. Around midnight, he woke up. There was something tapping on his window. Then he heard what sounded like someone giggling. More than a little frightened, he worked up the courage to investigate it. He jumped out of bed, went over to the window, and opened it. There was nothing there. The next day, he showed the photo to his friends and neighbors and asked if they knew the mysterious girl. Everybody he asked said they had never seen the girl before in their lives. That night, as he lay in bed, he heard the tapping sound again. He looked out the window and could just make out a figure standing on the other side of the street. He couldn't be sure, but it looked like the mysterious girl in the photograph. Clutching the picture tightly, he threw on his clothes and raced downstairs and out the front door. As he crossed the road, he forgot to look both ways and was suddenly hit by a car. The driver got out of the car and ran over to help the boy, but it was no use. The boy had been killed on impact. The driver noticed something clutched in the boy's hand. It was a photograph. Turning it over in his hands, the driver realized it was a picture of an incredibly beautiful girl. She was wearing a black top, a short black skirt, black tights, and black shoes. For some reason, she was holding up 3 fingers.